Hi, and hello, and a warm welcome to everyone joining our live today. If you're watching our event live, we want you to put live in the comments. If you're checking it on the replay, you can put replay. My name is Gail, and I help small businesses with their customer experience business strategy. And I do that by focusing on everything customer service, and this includes training of their teams so that they become customer service superheroes. Today, we're talking about loneliness and mental health. And yes, there is an unseen cost. Joining me today is Jolene King. I'll tell you a little bit about Jolene as I bring her from the back of the stage. Jolene is an employee and workplace health specialist. She's an occupational psychologist, mental health specialist, and advocate. She's also an experienced HR professional with over 18 years' experience in international business. Jolene is a qualified mental health first aider, and she's a principal consultant at 246 Consulting. And this is a company which offers health and well being services related to the design of business strategies, mental health awareness training, and absence management. And that is a lot. Welcome, Jolene. It is great to have you with us here today. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. And how are you? And hello to everyone who is live.
Thanks for everybody joining us. So let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about why it's important to know about loneliness and understand its effect in the workplace? Because this is novel for us. We don't really think about being lonely or loneliness as a thing. So can you share a little bit about that for us?
Well, I like my definitions and I like to
Please.
put things in
Yes.
context. So, loneliness is not the same as being alone.
Mhm.
You can be lonely and be amongst people, but being alone is merely just being by yourself. So, feeling lonely is about feeling isolated, and that is the crux of it, and it's very subjective because what one person can deem as feeling lonely someone else might not. So
Mhm.
why is it really important is because it can affect anyone at any age. It is not just something that older people will experience.
Mhm.
So it is considered a social and public health crisis, and this was prior to COVID-19 pandemic. So you can imagine what the situation is like now post pandemic.
Mhm.
So it's you also have to think about how it can affect the workplace. So we've got the situation now where there are a lot of people who are doing remote working, night
Mhm.
work, hybrid working, lone workers, shift work, and all of that and all the variables within can perpetuate loneliness and people feeling lonely. So that's why it's so important because it is a public health crisis. It can affect anyone at any time, and it has not had a lot of attention over the years, and it's something that we need to pay attention to because it has effect on people's mental health and well-being.
Because I was gonna ask, how are you actually aware of this loneliness? Like, are you tracking stats in any form? Especially, I know, like with COVID, yes, a lot of us now miss that social interaction. You're not leaving your home and going into an office and standing by the water cooler, as an example, and having those conversations. So, how are we tracking loneliness?
Well, actually, in the UK, there was a loneliness project. So they
Mm-hmm.
were actually looking at the stats and trying to quantify the impact of loneliness and defining exactly what it is. And from
Mm-hmm.
then, there's been a loneliness employers leadership group. And
Wow.
now there's a task and finish group called the Tackling Loneliness Network. And they
Mm-hmm.
have quantified it because there's been input from a number of businesses and organizations. So, yes, it has been identified and
Okay, well, that's
quantified.
good. Mm-hmm. So, what signs would I look for in someone who's experiencing loneliness, especially if I'm like a manager or I work with somebody? What signs am I looking for that might suggest this person is experiencing loneliness?
Change in behavior, withdrawal, especially from social situations. So, for instance, if you normally have meetings and different social events, and the person is always absent or giving excuses,
Mm-hmm.
that may be an indicator. And definitely starting to like avoid people and not interact.
Mm-hmm.
And those people who may seem forgotten, because as I referenced before, the people who work remotely, you don't see them often. People who are on different shift patterns, you might not see them often. So you will notice if you miss them once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And then another group of people that you really have to pay attention to are people who might be on long term absence, because sometimes they can get forgotten if they aren't regular check ins.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the types of people that if you don't hear from them and you don't see them, those are some of the signs
Mm-hmm.
in the
But how
workplace that you can look
how much
for.
harder is it for me to check on somebody on my team who's working remotely? Because now we're talking online. It's like, am I monitoring, for example, how many times you're missing a meeting or you're logging on late or you always have some kind of thing going on in the background? I don't mean like literal noise per
Yeah.
se, but something is wrong with your parents or you have to look after somebody or like there's always a reason for your behavior. Is that what I'm looking for? Because I think remotely has to be harder than having somebody not come to a meeting or you're watching them writing their notes or they're doodling. You have people who are always doodling and you say, is that person really paying attention? Like, are they distracted? It's much harder,
Well,
especially if you have a meeting and you're not required to be on camera. We don't like to be on camera, but I can't even read your body language, for example. So how is that for me? Harder.
no, Dawn, people who are lonely don't seek social activities. They have to be encouraged, but that's something I will discuss a bit later. So, to your point, Gail,
Mm-hmm.
if the onus is really on the line manager to establish good working relationships so they know what's happening with the people in their team and they're doing
Mm-hmm.
regular check-ins, because if you know, you mentioned people have things going on in their personal life. If you're a good manager and have good relationships with your staff, you know what's going on to some extent. Allowances are made. If somebody's logging in late, they will tell you why, because you have that relationship based on trust.
Mm-hmm.
If they're missing meetings for whatever reason, they won't feel intimidated or anything like that. And they'll be open enough to share what's really going on. Or the work culture will be such where people can feel that they can share these things, if not necessarily with their line manager, with someone else within the organization, or there is an employee assistance program. They have to be mechanisms within the organization so people feel psychologically safe to share what is going on so that the issue of loneliness does not become prevalent.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that's an important point because sometimes we hesitate to share, for fear of labeling or judgment or,
Exactly.
maybe possible victimization in whatever form that might look
Mhm.
like. So we hesitate to share, but you really may need that support. So, how can we support somebody? We've identified these signs now and we think they're struggling with loneliness. Like, what can we do to support this person if you want to share some tips for us?
I've referenced the regular check ins, and
Mm
I'm a big proponent of regular check ins with people.
hmm. Mm
That
hmm.
is the social aspect. Humans are social creatures. We're not meant to be by ourselves all the time. We're meant to be interacting with each other and have a community. So, regular check ins, and these check ins need to be quality. We would have spoken previously about the when you ask somebody how you're doing, actually paying attention.
Mm hmm.
So that's
And
that's
not walking
the
out.
is the quality of the connection, not just the quantity, but the quality of the connection. So spend
Mm hmm.
quality time with that person and also encourage them to socialize with others. So Dawn, to your point, encourage people to seek social activities, while it might be Some workplaces have like social groups where they organize things outside of work, or they could be activities within that person's area, encourage them to start volunteering their time. And one thing that I have said on an organizational front is that organizations should be encouraging people to volunteer and offer paid time off if it's during
Mhm.
working hours to
Mhm.
volunteer.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree 300%.
And of course, if you recognize that people are experiencing loneliness, yes, you encourage them to socialize, but gradually so that they don't feel overwhelmed. Too much
Mm,
stimulus could put them right back into that hole wherever they were. So it's baby steps,
mhm.
baby steps.
So I have my own question now based on that answer. How are you framing this check-in? I'm thinking when I asked that question about company culture. So
Mm,
we are trying to get our people to be more supportive of each other. May
yes.
not be the company culture. And I'm telling my team, I could be the CEO, and I'm telling my team of managers, listen, you need to do better at checking in with your people. We are concerned, especially where mental health is concerned. But this person, your manager, has never checked in on you. And to use a Bajan term, you don't want nobody to be malicious in your business. So how are you framing? No, because I don't want you
I
knowing my stuff.
understand. I
And
understand.
you mentioned trust. I don't want my business all out there. So this is a new culture that we are trying to promote.
Okay.
How am I framing this check-in when I call you?
Well,
Hi, Jolene, what's going on? Tell me your business.
there's
I know
no
you don't
there
say that.
there's guidance to the
Hmm.
quality of the check-in and the types of questions. So
Excellent.
there's a script that you can
Hmm.
follow.
Hmm.
How are
Hmm.
you doing? I've actually seen this. Organizations I've worked with actually have a guidance script for managers on how to conduct check-ins
Nice.
and well-being
Hmm. Hmm.
discussions.
Hmm.
Just some brief bullet point questions. And if something is flagged, then it's almost like a flow chart. This is what you do
Hmm.
next. If this
Hmm.
person's saying this is what you signpost them to. So don't deviate from the script. And
Hmm.
then
Don't get creative.
you ensure consistency
Hmm.
and transparency.
Hmm. I love that
And that
answer. I am
script
the
would have been
queen.
developed working with occupational health and
Hmm.
organizational development and the well-being team. So it's not like the questions have been plucked out of thin air. They have
Hmm.
been,
There's a
um,
science. There's a science.
yes, they have been signed off.
Okay. So I was
So
gonna say
that
that
is
I am
how
the
to do it.
queen of scripts, and I know some people don't believe in scripts because I guess the person actually saying whatever words are on the script might seem robotic or they might not seem natural, but scripts are really, really useful and they really help. They really help. I find scripts to be very, very valuable. So I'm glad you said that, especially in terms of guidance, because everybody may not know, especially if it's a new culture you're trying to promote. So, what can
It
we
takes practice.
ourselves? Yes.
Let's address some of these questions though.
Well, no, before we get there,
Shelly,
Jolene,
no, no,
we
no,
want to do it there.
Shelly is saying there's a lack of confidentiality. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the thing here is that breaching confidentiality is misconduct across all organizations. So whoever has breached confidentiality, that is a disciplinary matter. If it is a manager, they will go through the disciplinary process like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how you safeguard against that. If people realize that such breaches are dealt with, then it's all part of having a proper culture.
Mm-hmm.
We can move on, I think.
Well, no, let's just go back. I had one more question and then we're going to get to the comments. But seeing that we are in the comments, let's just go there.
Sure.
Because well, I mean, Julie had a good point as well. She's saying, what drives most of us crazy is when people ask how you're doing and they don't listen. They just move on.
We talked about that last
We
Monday
did
as
talk
well.
about that. So Dawn actually has a question as well. How can you make the connection or difference between feeling loneliness and being reclusive? So I might not be lonely. I just might not want to deal with people. I like my own company. I want to be by
Exactly.
myself. Like, is there like how would you?
Feeling lonely is a feeling. Being
Mm-hmm,
reclusive is a desire.
mm-hmm,
So they're not one and the same. I could be very good being by myself, not wanting to be around people. I'm good, leave me alone. Feeling lonely is about feeling socially isolated. So
mm-hmm.
that
And
is a
you
summary
would
of
pick
the
that up
difference.
then from your script, I guess, if you're trying to figure out, am I lonely or am I reclusive? Correct.
Um, if you're talking to someone, being reclusive is about observation,
Mm-hmm,
but feeling lonely is a feeling that they will need to describe. Because as
mm-hmm.
I said, it's
Okay,
subjective.
great. And I think those were the last comments. So my question that I was going to move into was, how do
Yes.
we ourselves prevent us from being overwhelmed by loneliness? What can I do to avoid that? And I'm not reclusive. Like, what can I do?
Do regular check-ins with yourself.
Oh, how do I do that, Jolene?
Check in.
I
Check
don't
in
know.
with
Like,
yourself every day on a scale of 1 to 10. Determine how you are feeling.
ah,
On my LinkedIn, I actually posted last week. It is
mhm,
about a MOT, which
what
is
does
a
MOT stand for?
roadworthy in Barbados. That's what you call it. So you
Mm-hmm,
ask yourself particular questions. How am I doing? How am I feeling? What's going on with my body? Why do I feel this way?
mm-hmm,
And that's how you do your regular check-ins. You also need to connect with friends and family. These are current people. You might want to reconnect with somebody, an old friend who you might not have heard from. Um, Volunteering your time again, which is really good because that generates the oxytocin, which is that feel good hormone, which can
mm-hmm.
elevate
From
your mood,
giving, from
which,
giving.
yes,
Yes.
which helps with your mental health. Yeah, so that's really some of the tips for how you as an individual can address any feelings of loneliness.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us about the article that you authored? Because we talked about that backstage as
It
well.
was
And
just let me find it and I will put it in the chat.
if people need to find those questions to do that check in on ourselves, of course we reach out to you and you can fill those in for us. So I'm just
Can
gonna
everybody
put
see that?
no, I'm gonna put it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Here we go.
And we got to talk about the costs.
Yes, so let's talk about costs. That's a good point.
Yep.
So what are the unseen costs of loneliness to my business or to any business?
There's a social impact with if people are withdrawing, then they're not going to be as productive. But I'm going to actually give you some figures that have come out of the
Mm-hmm.
UK. So the cost of loneliness to UK employers is estimated to be, pause for this, 2.5 billion pounds per year, every
Hmm.
year. So within that 2.5 billion, the staff turnover is 1.62 billion, lower well-being and productivity 665 million, the impact of caring responsibilities 220 million, and ill health and associated sickness absence 20 million. And individually is estimated at £9,900 per person per year is due to the impact of loneliness on well-being, health, and productivity. So you see, these are not small figures.
No,
And
they're
is
very
real,
big.
and a lot of the costs associated with it to center around the health and care service interventions that have to
Mm-hmm.
be used to get someone well. And you got to remember that people who are feeling lonely are more prone to poor or ill health and unhealthy practices. They may be
Mhm.
smoking, overeating, misusing and abusing substances. They're likely to be less active and they're more likely to suffer falls. So, all of that can put a strain on health costs. So, if you think about that within the workplace, if there's someone who's going through any of those things, they will be missing work. They won't be as productive. They might be missing work. So, that is impacted on sick pay, um, the workload that has to be redistributed to who's there, any recruitment costs that you might incur, having temporary staff. There are
Mhm.
always direct and indirect costs to this. So those
Mhm.
are the costs associated with loneliness. Who is at fault? Oh,
Yeah.
Brandy, what a
I don't know.
question.
That's a
What
tough
a
one.
question. I don't
Mhm.
want to say anybody is to blame. It is just a matter of being proactive so that people are feeling less lonely and also having a culture where you're promoting good health and well-being to reduce those costs.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
the responsibility of employer and employee.
Yeah, I naturally never thought about who was at fault. I was just glad
No,
that there are stats to support this
there
because
are
sometimes people
statistics,
don't
yes.
believe what you're saying unless there are stats. So I'm glad that there are stats out there, to show yes, this is serious business.
Yes,
Great.
Dawn, loneliness can lead to depression.
Mhm. Yep. I'll just put that up quickly. Loneliness can lead to depression. So it's something that we need to be aware of. And I'm glad that Jolene is here today to talk about it because I never even knew, to be honest, that it was a thing. I mean, I know people are lonely, but I never connected the dots between that feeling of loneliness, which could lead into depression or anxiety or any other health issue, and then how that in turn translate into the effects on a business, because of course there's a cost in terms of performance or lack thereof.
And I'll also say this, with the cost of living increases and people having more strain on their finances, that also leads
Mhm.
to loneliness because you're
Mm,
restricted with what you can do with whatever funds you have available to you, which
mhm.
also will impact on your health and well-being, especially your financial well-being.
Mhm. You're referring specifically to the increase in gas prices, I take it, where we drive around less. I
An
don't know.
increase in everything.
Because
If
people
you
more
don't have
stay home.
disposable income, you're more inclined to stay home
Home. Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
don't have the income to do anything outside of what is required.
Mhm. I agree. So as we begin to close out, I'm just gonna
But one
put.
question you didn't ask me,
Oh,
I kind of
I.
filtered it into other things. I
Oh,
have it
tell
written
me.
here. What are
Yeah.
some of the situations that can bring on loneliness?
Yes, actually, that was number two. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. So, Jolene, what are some of the situations that can bring on loneliness?
I spoke
Tell us.
about some of it before.
You
So
did.
the
You talked about COVID. Mm-hmm.
isolation due to, well, the COVID-19 pandemic or anything else that would lead to isolation, bereavement or
Mm-hmm.
loss. So bereavement is not necessarily a death. It could be job loss, it could be divorce, it could be anything linked to loss, long-term absence or critical illness.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that can leave people feeling isolated because, especially with long term absence, when you get discharged from the hospital, everybody's showing up with flowers and everything else. 2 weeks later,
You're on
the
your
phone
own.
calls start getting less and
Mm-hmm.
less and less. And imagine if this person is off for 3, 4, 5 months or more.
Mm-hmm.
So, those things can bring on feelings of loneliness.
Mm-hmm. Is it like bereavement as well? Because people seem to think
Yes, I said bereavement.
when you've
Mhm.
lost somebody close, that after the funeral, everything goes back to normal. So like you said, the
No.
flowers stop coming, the calls stop coming, they think you're okay. But really and truly, that process of grieving that person who's no longer with you has only now started, really
And
and
it's not
truly.
only that, it's their absence from your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
So
we're gonna
that can feel to lead that can lead to feelings of loneliness as
What do
well.
you think about this comment? Sometimes
Shelly. Okay.
management and HR are so caught up in putting out fires operationally that if these check ins are not a part of the overall strategic plan and scheduled accordingly, they will be overlooked. What do you
I
think about that?
remember, well, I remember last Monday when we said it has to start from the top.
Hmm. It has to be
And
scheduled,
it is,
has to happen.
yes, and is also supposed to be built in to your processes where if it is sickness absence or any type of process, regular check-ins are part of the process.
And they should be. They should be.
So it's a checklist. So it can't be you can't leave it one side.
Hmm.
So
And I
if
strongly
that's what's
believe,
happening, then they need to review their practices and policies and strategic
yes,
plans.
they do. And I believe what gets measured gets done. So somewhere in there, you need to be able to measure what is being done and
And
make sure that it happens
documented.
and document. Yes, that is a good point. So can we wrap up, Jolene, or are you? I don't see any more
Sure.
comments.
I don't
I mean
know.
questions. I see
Any tips on how
oh,
they
Charles
manage
is
this?
saying a study recently indicated that there was an increase in UE students being depressed. Any tips for how they can manage this?
Not in this session. I will leave that for another
Okay.
time. I can't just
Yeah.
keep giving away information.
What this means, everyone on this live stream, is that Jolene is going to come back because she said not in this session. So we have hope. But
That's
yes,
not
I
what
think,
I mean.
yes. Oh, that's not what that means. So what we're going to do, thanks for that question, Cheryl. We'll just we'll see how we can answer that for you. Any other comments that haven't been addressed, we'll address them afterwards as well. I just wanted to take the opportunity quickly to give you, and I'll put it up on the screen, to share some information for you about how to contact Jolene. So, Jolene, of course, can be reached via her website, and I'll just put it up on the screen for everybody. And that's J King. Sorry, that's her email address. Sorry. She can be reached at jking at 246king.com. And then there is her website, which is 246king.com. I find all of Jolene's information is very, very easy to remember. She's not leaving us to think about too much stuff. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm having some technical issues.
Should I just put it in?
There we go. See, that's her website.
Okay.
And the best thing about today for Jolene is that if you're watching this, you can use a code. She's available for talks to your organization, and she's also available to create policy development. And if you're interested in working with her, you just need to reach out to Jolene and you can use this code. It's 246 King 30M. The offer is going to expire today, however, which means that you have to reach out to her today. And you can do that, as I said, via email. You can do that via her website. The good thing about her website is that it has this facility where you can actually contact her and put in your email address and she will contact you. And what else did you say, Jolene? I'm forgetting something. If you contact her today to make a booking for future services, you will also receive some very useful mental health fact sheets. But as I said, this
But
offer
we it
expires
has,
today.
yeah.
You have to
But the
contact
fact
her
sheets will only
today.
be issued if you book.
Yes, so you have to book. She's very clear about this. You have to book and you have to use the code on the screen when you are reaching out to Jolene. So, Jolene, let us wrap up. What is your final thought on loneliness? What is your go to for us today as we wrap up today's session?
Loneliness can affect anyone at any time. Remember to stay connected to friends and family and just take care of your health and well-being.
Hmm.
Being part of a community is very important.
Yes, and I agree. And I want to thank you for joining us today and
You're
for
welcome.
agreeing to this part two. It was a very, very informative conversation. We have all learned a lot. We'll just continue to check the comments because sometimes people do access our lives on the replay, and we will keep everybody aware of these issues that affect mental health that sometimes get swept under the rug. So thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Enjoy your Monday and remember to make it matter. We'll see you guys later. Bye.